We're live.
Hey, we're live. All right, all right. We'll
Hello,
see,
Marty.
Hello, guys.
how are you doing this evening?
Great.
And
So,
go
ahead, Gary.
I'm just looking at my Facebook page. It is
Yeah.
on, so we're good there.
Okay. Yeah, we're connected. I already see we got 4. Marty, just so you know, the first minute or so, it takes just a little bit to get some people joining on because their phone's clicking right now. But so first of all, thanks for joining tonight. We're going to have a good time here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, yeah. We want to just, talk a little bit about your history, with racing. You're one of the local racing families around here, which is super cool. And to be honest with you, like, you're known around the world. I mean, I know you sell converters to people in Australia and Brazil and I don't even know where, but you probably sell.
Hot Rod, you know me as just the kid that grew up around the corner from you.
I know, man. I tell people all the time we used to ride like bicycles together and stuff. And there was Gary had a little interview on me the other day, and Mitch Brown chimed in, and he was talking about this 73 Camaro that you used to have that had like Kraggers and 50s on it and everything. And I just oohed and all about that thing. I remember like your dad having his Corvette in the driveway over there, like the funny car. And I didn't know what I was looking at, but I thought it was cool as heck. You know what I mean?
That funny car, Mitch Brown found the body to that funny car on Facebook about 6 or 7 years ago. And me and him went and bought it, and we got it probably 90% restored. No, it was about 90% restored in 2019 when I got sick, had a little health snafu, and haven't actually touched it since.
So you still have it though?
Still have it. The doctor says I'm never supposed to get in a race car again, and I don't trust myself. If I finish the car, I'm driving it. There's no way. I mean, growing up as a kid, my dad, Neal Chance, was my hero. Him and Tom McEwen, which, by the way, I have Tom McEwen's funny car now too. And it was about 90% done at the time I got sick. And I think probably a good weekend or two, and I could have both of them running.
Right.
The problem
what era of McEwen's car do you have?
I have the red and white Coors Corvette. It's probably one of the easiest ones to document because the tin work was done by H&H. So it's got the H&H button in the center. And right after I purchased it, I got a hold of Jim Hume. Jim Hume was still alive at that point, and it was real easy for him to identify it because I bought it from Cyril Leone, and Cyril had repainted it. And I wanted to verify absolutely which one it was. And Jim Hume had told me that he had only done the tin work on one car for Tom McEwen, and it was the red and white Coors car, which I thought great because that's what Cyril told me it was, the red and white Coors car, which Don Garlitz has the other one in his museum. But I would say this, when Tom passed away a few years ago, 5 years ago, I think it was, I went ahead and painted it as the 1978 car that they made the movie of because it's the same body. It's just after 1978 when he, won the race against the Snake, just after his son had died of leukemia, Jamie, and it was a big emotional thing. It was all over TV, when we was kids in 1978.
Oh yeah.
And, so I'd always liked the English leather car. It was always my favorite.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I remember having that Hot Wheel with that car back in the day. I mean, that's one of my first little Hot Wheels and stuff. And so like, let's take it to the left real quick. Let's talk about, like, I knew you grew up in Hayesville and you went to Christian Challenge and that sort of thing. So like, what did you drive to school in high school? What did you drive?
My first car was a 73 Camaro. And
like right out of the gate, bam.
Right on.
Hot rod.
Great story behind that because I'm the youngest of 4. And my other siblings never got the racing disease that my dad had. But I had it, hook, line, and sinker. I went to work for my dad at 12 years old. My first job was pulling transmissions out of cars. By the time I was 14 years old, I was building automatic transmissions, and I did a lot of that, for all the guys in Hayesville, cash jobs. And so I had my own money by the time I turned 14. And back then, Hot Rod, at 14, you could get a You get your learner's permit for the first 6 months, and at 14 and a half, you could get a restricted. But a restricted back then meant you could go to and from school, to and from work, to and from church. You could go on errands for your parents. So all of us drove around everywhere with a loaf of bread in the back seat saying we were just on an errand, right? Well, anyways, when I turned 14, I already had the money to buy a car, and I wanted a big block Camaro.
Yeah.
And my mom had already warned my dad. She said, Neal Chance, you get my boys into racing, I'll kill you. I'll kill you in your sleep. And so he was bound and determined I wasn't going to have a hot rod. But I wasn't buying, it was my money. I wasn't spending anything, but I wanted a Camaro.
Sure.
And I wanted that body style, that 70 to 73. Well, everything I found, I'd take my dad. Dad, come look at this. Come look at this. He found something wrong. That's a piece of junk. You buy that piece of junk. I'll never touch it. You're on your own. So he intimidated me into buying the one he wanted. Well, this went on for a couple of months. When you're 14 years old and you can drive now, that money's burning a hole in your pocket. You want to go, you want to go get that car. And so he tells me at lunchtime, he goes, hey, you got your money for that car? I said, yeah. He goes, I found your car for you. It's at a car lot up on Broadway. Everybody in Wichita knows South Broadway is where you bought all your cars when you was a kid.
Sure.
Anyways, so we head up there, and it's this pumpkin orange with white stripes, and it's an inline 6-cylinder with a clutch. I'm like, you gotta be kidding, Dad. He's like, no, you gotta buy this car. Well, my first car was a 73 Camaro that looked cool, and it had the total disappointment under the hood. But that didn't last long because I had this dune buggy that me and my dad had built out of 1-inch square tubing. You guys are probably old enough to remember the old Roadrunner cycle salvage. I went up and bought an RM125 2-stroke motor out of the cycle salvage. Built this thing with like a live axle and lawnmower tires and stuff, right? And so I got my first V8 by trading that to Doug at Doug's Amico. Remember the
it's still going today. It's still going right now. Yeah.
I had Doug put a V8 in my Camaro. So it started off with a small block 350. That only lasted about 12 months before I had the money and built myself a big block.
Oh yeah.
You got a big block.
Yeah, big block. So
hey Rod,
Rod,
have you ever owned a big block Chevy?
I have not. Yeah, of course. Kind of. I mean, that 648, is an Oldsmobile headed deal. But
oh, that's right. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but me, I stay in the small block Ford lane, and we'll talk to Marty about that in a little bit because I know his last, little hot rod was a small block Ford. So I finally converted him over after all these years.
Oh my God. That was the saddest day in my dad's life. When I came home with a Ford. Now I was in my 30s. So I wasn't a kid bringing a Mustang home. My dad bled Chevy Orange. He hated Fords. He just had an unreal hate for anything blue. So he didn't even like the color. When I get this Ford Mustang to go small tire racing. Now you got to understand, I was friends with David Wolf, and I had a 67 Chevelle that I was building to be my first small tire car. Now my first race car was a rear engine drag show that I built out of a kit, and I started building that my senior year in high school. Just buying part. I didn't have the kit yet, but I sold chassis kits for a guy out of Kansas City. Called him Caveman because his shop was back in the caves. Okay. And so my first race car was a rear engine drag show with a big block Chevy. I went into the small tire. The first door car I ever drove was a small tire car, the Mustang, and it started with small block Chevy, which eased my dad's pain, but still, bringing home a Ford, he just looked at me and shook his head and he said, "Boy, I don't know what you think of the name Smith or Jones, but you're changing yours."
So hold on a second, Gary. Hold on a second.
I
know the answer to this. Marty, I got 2 questions. First question, how fast have you been? Like the fastest ever? What's your fastest pass?
Quarter mile was my dragster back in the 1980s. I went 752 at like 180, like 186. That was at Wichita, and Wichita has the Valley Center, Wichita Valley Center floodway at the end of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had a parachute failure at like 186.
Oh my goodness.
And
then?
that was scary. I thought I was fearless, but that scared me.
Now hold on. What about the 8th mile? What's your fastest? I already know the answer.
That's the thing about getting old. I don't
was
know
at
if I
Georgia,
missed
right?
my hair or my memory the most.
It was
My
at Georgia.
fast was a 430 in the Mustang.
Right.
But that was sandbagging. It was an X275 car. And anybody who knows anything about X275, we're all the biggest liars in the world. We're all crying, we got to have a weight break. My combination needs a weight break.
Yeah.
So we were sandbagging big time just to run 430s, because this is 2018. And if you went 430s, you could be number 1, 2, or 3 anywhere. And if you're number 1, 2, or 3, you're already on the hit list to get weight.
Yep.
So
Right.
So 430, what could it have ran if he wasn't sandbagging?
I think the car would have probably went mid-20s, maybe a low 20.
Ooh,
I don't know. I wish I hadn't have sold it before I got to find that out. A wise man, Dean Marinas, told me one time, was at Ducks race, and Dean was number 1 qualifier and I was number 2. And I had told him something about, sandbagging. I wanted to go too fast. And he just shook his head. He goes, if you got the chance to break the record, do it, because you never know when that chance is going to end. And truer words were never spoke, because in 2019, I had a stroke.
Right.
At 51 years old, I had a stroke, and that ended my racing. All 3 of my doctors said, you'll never, ever drive a race car again. I feel great. I know I could get in behind that car, but the 4th doctor, he was the only one that explained it well. He said, he goes, his verbiage was, if you rattled your head real good, you could have a brain bleed and your days of lucky are over. Wow. After that sunk in for about a week, I went, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So was that the DeSoma motor in that one? When, the 430 deal you're talking about?
Yeah, that, I had 2 motors. One was, we call it the boss motor, because my good friend, Nick Bruder, he called it I don't want to say this on, he called it the bag of stuff, but he didn't say stuff. So we call it the BOS motor, the boss motor. And he called it that because there's a bunch of my old blown up junk that I'd thrown together. Yeah. And then Anthony had built me a really nice motor, a 460 cubic inch small block Ford with a 4 1/4 stroke.
Right.
And we ran both of those motors back to back at Denton, within 50 foot of DA. And my little boss motor went 100th faster. And it was just a bunch of junk. But what, it wasn't a bunch of everything but the cylinder heads. The cylinder heads were what made it work really good. I had a one-off set of heads from Lee Latuska. The racing world knows him as Pro Stock Lee. He's a Pro Stock cylinder head genius for the NHRA Pro Stock class. And we'd become friends, and he looked at the rules for me one time and built me this little set of heads. And that's really why that motor went so fast. I think a lot of people don't realize in the heads up world, I'm sorry, I'm throwing you off on a whole different thing, but as a torque converter tuner, when you're tuning torque converters, it's just like tuning a clutch. You're tuning for a rate of efficiency that allows the motor to accelerate the car at as fast as possible rate. I call that load sensitivity. Every motor has a different load sensitivity. The little boss motor didn't have the peak horsepower number that the DeSoma motor did, but the cylinder head had tremendous velocity at low RPM. And a lot of people don't realize that velocity through the top end of the motor, even on a boosted motor, velocity in the top end of a motor dictates load sensitivity. So if you've got a top end that'll have a high velocity at a lower RPM, your motor can take load at a faster rate. Clumsy analogy. small block guys that know what the SB2 headed Chevy motor is, it's a motor that came out of NASCAR, or it's a cylinder head that came out of NASCAR. You put that in a drag race application, they make great power numbers on the dyno, but they're real soggy down low. You got to have a ton of slippage to make them run, and all that slippage leaves a lot on the table. You take the extreme opposite, like the old 455 Olds Buick head. That thing flowed just barely better than a Briggs and Stratton, but they made huge torque at low RPM, but they was done at like 5,000 RPM. Okay. That motor with the cylinder head, that Buick had tremendous velocity at a very low RPM. That's why that motor could take load at a real low RPM.
Sure.
So
that Ford head you're talking about, was it the 7709, the Pro Stock head you're talking about, or?
Yeah, it was the Victor Glidden head. And for that head, it flowed like 430, which was pretty good for that cylinder head.
Yeah.
The SC1 flowed better. I think it was 460 or 70.
Sure.
But having that broad power band allowed us to run a really tight converter in it. I mean, the converter I ran in that car, you could put in a dump truck and it'd work.
So let's take it to the left a little bit about your business. So like I remember, when I was in high school as well, I rode by Seneca and everything, and see, the little shop, the first shop that you guys had out there. And so you were just saying a little bit ago, you're helping your dad when you were 14 years old, getting a little cash money. And I think Flip was in there somewhere hanging around with you guys as well, but we could talk about that in a second. But when did you decide, you know what, I'm going to do my own converter deal? I'm going to open up my own doors. And I'm going to kick some doors open and just start messing with these torque converters.
Well, growing up in my dad's transmission shop, building transmissions, I enjoyed that, but every kid wants to do something a little different than his dad and have his dad be proud of him. Right. In other words, you want to do it your own way, but you want dad to pat you on the back and go, man, son, you did a good job. I'm proud of you. So I didn't want to just do what he did. And my oldest brother, Mitch, he got my dad to get a lathe, and we started cutting converters open. I was in high school. I think I was 15 or so when we started doing that. And once we started building converters, I didn't have any interest in transmissions. I never want to touch a transmission again. I just wanted to mess with those torque converters. And the more I learned about it, it just drove me. And it was the right place at the right time. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the late 70s, early 80s, there was no technology in racing torque converters. Everybody who was a torque converter company was a transmission shop that went, well, if I'm going to sell you a racing transmission and there's nobody to sell you a converter, I guess I'll build it. And everything in the racing converter world was all monkey see, monkey do. They spent all their money developing their transmission, and nobody really concentrated on the converter. Nobody did that. And then of course, us being based out of Wichita, Kansas is the right place to get into a business that there's never been any technology, because in Wichita, Kansas, everything's aerospace.
Right.
Every aerospace company in the world is here, whether it's Boeing, Cessna, Learjet, Fuego, McDonnell Douglas, Beechcraft, you name it. All the aerospace is here. So everybody's either a CNC machinist or an engineer. So technology was readily available. And that's what the racing converter industry needed. So I'm not any smarter than anybody else. I was just at the right place in the right time to bring technology into the racing torque converter industry.
Right. Yep. So then, you're building the converters out and everything, and you're cutting them apart with the lathe. How many years into it, and when did you decide to catch on to this bolt together design?
My dad actually wanted to do the first bolt together. And there was a guy up in Kansas City that was doing them out of his garage at home, and we actually started doing it and brought it to the racing industry. Now this was over 40 years ago. When we took it to the industry, just wide open, was in 1987. We took it to the SEMA show. This was before there was a PRI show. We took it to the SEMA show and was best engineered new racing product of the year with it. And that just blew the doors open. Now, all of a sudden, instead of us just being a little shop in based out of South Wichita or Hayesville, Kansas. Now all of a sudden we was a national and international company because of the bolt together. And most of the racing converter industry really dogged on us. They hated it. I won't mention their names because I won't be derogatory about any other converter companies, but two converter companies hit us up and said we were fools for doing it. They said, you make a bolt together converter, this converter's never coming back to you for the winter repair money. What are you going to do for income? And we thought, well, we're all racers and we're thinking like racers. And a torque converter should be bolt together. The analogy would be, what if racing engines came with the cylinder heads welded on it? And so somebody comes out with a bolt-on cylinder head. You may not take your cylinder head off at the racetrack, but if you need to, you'd sure like to be able to.
Sure.
And that's, it wasn't that I think we invented something revolutionary that even though it did change the racing, it's the way it should have been in the first place. And to kind of back up, Honda made a bolt together. A lot of the industrial world made bolt together converters, like for dump trucks, like big 14, 15-inch aluminum bolt together. They were cast aluminum. So right from the beginning, I was looking at these Honda bolt together converters thinking, we need to make an aluminum converter. It took me a long time to get the money to do it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hey, we know your dad was involved in the transmission business. Is that solely where the transmission stuff started with racing? Was like your grandpa or Neal's dad, was he involved in racing or cars in any way, or did Neal was the only one that kind of spearheaded this whole start?
No, just the opposite. My grandfather was a farmer.
Okay.
And my dad was on a tractor from the time he was old enough to reach the pedals, or probably before. And I think he had a lot of bitterness about that. He absolutely hated farming. All he wanted to do was cars. And my grandfather thought that, this car stuff is just an absolute waste of time. But once my dad, got into the industry, my grandpa was real proud of him. And he came around. It's just, it was out of grandpa's wheelhouse to see this, a guy waste all of his money on making his car faster.
Yeah.
Seems silly.
Well, my grandfather, his era came through the Great Depression. And,
sure.
That's been almost 100 years ago now. So a lot of people listening don't know anybody who went through that. And at that time, you didn't waste anything. I mean, literally every nickel counted. So the getting into the prosperity of the 1950s and 1960s, America really started to take off financially, and we had expendable income that my grandfather's era had never seen. And now our kids and grandkids are seeing expendable income that we never dreamed of,
Right.
And we think about what, most of us probably bought our own first car, and it was probably a big clunker piece of junk. But you drive through the average high school now, and they're driving cars until we were 30 or 40 years old.
Absolutely. Exactly. So Marty, I remember coming to your shop when you're on South Seneca, and just talking for a minute. And you had some good employees there, good company going. Everything was kind of going. We talked about how you're just trying to keep it going. And then I think it was like May 6th, 1999. And I think when the tornado came through, it kind of changed some things. Is that fair?
Yeah. My life was completely changed that day. It was May 3rd, 1999. The tornado started in Moore, Oklahoma. It was the biggest tornado ever recorded at that time. It was I think 9 mile an hour short of F6, and F6 hadn't been recorded. Of course, it was a measly F4 when it came through Hayesville, Kansas. So national media didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And I get a phone call that says your business is gone. It got you. There was nothing left, no building there at all. There was a concrete slab and a couple of machines scattered around. I try to, you know, get a hold of all my employees and say, guys, you know, don't worry about this. I don't want you guys sweating it. You know, insurance, I'm sure, is going to take care of us, and we're going to come back better. But that wasn't the case. Insurance completely weaseled out. This was one of the greatest trials of my life to that time. Was I lost everything, and it was nothing of my doing.
Yeah.
In an instant, everything I'd worked for all my life had been taken away, and there was nothing left. At that point, you know, you got a choice. You can get bitter and turn away, or you can go, I started with nothing. Some nobody kid from Hayesville, Kansas, and I worked my way to this point. I can do it again.
Right.
And so that's what we did.
How many employees did you have at that time when that happened?
I think we had 8 or 9 at that time.
Dang.
And 1 year to the day, May 3rd, 2003, I signed the deal on the building in Cheney, which was literally 10 times. I was in a 4,000 square foot building at the time of the tornado, and we wound up in a 40,000 square foot building. And for those of you who don't believe in God or in miracles, I'm going to tell you this. We purchased that building for $125,000. And if that wasn't a gift from God, I don't know what is.
Yeah. I remember you telling me you were going to move out there, and at first I was like, what, why would you move to Cheney? Like Cheney, you know, and I remember how, like it was yesterday, you just explained the business side of it, how, you know, it's a bigger building, more machines, and most of your converters go outside of Kansas anyway. And so, like, you know, it was the right thing to do. And I remember the first time you walked me through that place too, I was just like, oh my goodness, this thing is just awesome to have the way you had it set up in your office and kind of had your toys in the back. And it's just, I was just like, this is okay right here.
Yeah. When we first moved in there, I thought we'll never use this place. Now we've built on as much as we could. We even tore the fence down in the back so that we'd have access to the back to get the toter and stacker in. These last couple of years, you know, when the things economically were set in place where business got real hard to do, we've seen steel and aluminum and raw material prices go through the roof, and the ability to get those things. We just made a choice. We said, you know, we're not going to hold our breath and wait for normal to come back.
Yeah.
My banker's been with me from the very beginning, Doug Morley from Valley State Bank. And I called him. I said, Doug, I'm going to do something. I'm going to make a move that's bigger than me. I need all my money and a bunch of yours. I'm going to go out and buy material like 6-7 years worth at a time. And I'm going to stockpile. And we're going to run our CNC division 6 days a week. We're going to run CNCs lights out around the clock, and we're going to stockpile. We hired companies to come in and build us shelving to the ceiling so we could just pack this stuff in. And my banker had been with me. He knows my business plan is conservative, and he said, I got faith in you. Go buy whatever you need. There'll be a sack of money in the vault to cover whatever you buy. And that's what we did. And it worked out really well because most of the converter companies, you try to go order a converter and they're 4 or 8 or 12 weeks behind because they're waiting on someone to supply something for them. We literally make every single part in-house. We make everything. In fact, when the converter cores disappeared in 2020, what happened there was when steel prices went through the roof, so did scrap metal. So all the biggest core sellers scrapped out. They sold the cores, so there were no cores. So now we stamp our own converter cores, and we kind of base our core not off the stock converter core, but more like off of our billet stuff, so that when a guy buys our what you might consider our lesser expensive non-billet bolt together or weld together, it's actually got the billet technology because it's a Neal Chance stamping.
Oh, I see. Okay. So next question I have, just talking about going back to the left a little bit. You know, you talked about how, you know, when you're 14, you got the Camaro, you're talking about how you built a rear engine dragster and that sort of thing. I want to talk about like what I would call like the MSRA days. And, you know, that's like 98, 99. I can remember your dad out there racing the 55. And I can also remember, I think, you know, around that time frame, maybe a little bit to the right, you got the black Mustang. And and so just like take me through some memories there. I know the 55, you know, your dad and Flip campaigned. And so just share some memories there with that.
Well, I built the Mustang in 2000. And like I said, I started off with a 67 Chevelle. My buddy David Wolf, he tells me, oh, you can't run a Chevelle. The Chevy stuff doesn't work in 10-inch tire racing, and the stock suspension on them doesn't work. You got to have a Mustang. I'm like, Mustang?
Says the guy that builds Mustang parts.
I don't want a Mustang.
Right.
I want a Chevy. I got to have a Chevy. Are you serious? And he finally convinced me, you got to have a Mustang. So I sold my Chevelle, broke my father's heart, bought this Mustang out of New Jersey. Joby Spetter found it for me. And I bought this Mustang, and it became the co-op car because in 2000, I didn't have the money to build the car. So I traded everything I could. It started off at David Wolf's, and I traded him a bunch of converter stuff, and he got as far as he could on what I traded him. And then it went to my buddy Keith Engling, Skinny Kid Race Cars. And I did a bunch of trading with him and got the car a little farther along. Then I brought it home and still wasn't quite done. And I met Mike Duffy in Moore, Oklahoma, Mike Duffy Race Cars. He finished the car up. So all my buddies called it the co-op car because everybody and their brother worked on it. So
that's fun.
Yeah, built the thing in 2000, started off with a small block Chevy, nitrous motor.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was buddies with a guy named Dan Millen. Back in the early 2000s, Dan Millen was just ruling school. I mean, he was beating up on everybody. And he went to the turbo motor. And me and Dan had been doing some, I was supplying converters for him. Wouldn't charge him, just kind of keeping a list of, kind of a trade list, how much money he'd spent. And he only owed me like $5,000, something like that. And I told him, I want an EFI for my small block Chevy. He calls me back the next day and he goes, how about I give you my old Ford Mustang, or my old small block Ford? Is a 400 cubic inch motor with a Vortex Z trim blower. This was his first Super Street Outlaw combination. He did real well with it, went 833, and he had gone to turbo. He goes, we can't sell the motor through our company because it's used. He goes, so how about I just trade you this thing? And by the way, it comes with even a spare blower. I about fell out of my chair when he told me he's going to give me this turnkey motor with a spare blower. And what was I going to say? No, I don't like Fords. Okay, just plug your ears because I'm going to tell the truth about Fords here. So I start racing with the Ford, and right up, this is back when everything was still a quarter mile, and we raced in San Antonio with the God, what was that Ford, or what was that shootout
Clash
in
of the Titans?
Clash of the Titans.
I ran Clash of the Titans, and with the little Vortex Z trim, we went 813 the first weekend out. Dan Millen was there racing his car, and he came over to me just kidding. He goes, "Hey, I want my motor back because it only went 833 in my car." and so now the hard truth about racing Fords, if you're a Chevrolet guy and you can hold the heads on really well because Chevrolet bolts the heads on great, and now you start racing this boosted motor with 10 head bolts and you're racing the quarter mile. The heads are moving around. So but I did so well, so much better than I expected to do with that small block Z trim Ford motor. That I was hooked, the needle was in the vein. It's over. I gotta have this power. And if you're gonna heads up race with a small block Ford and heads up quarter mile, you gotta have a spare motor. So sorry for the crude analogy, but racing a Ford is like cancer. It grows on you and you can't get rid of it. Okay? So I'm selling everything I can to try to build a backup motor because we started racing NMCA Extreme Street.
Right.
And we go to Bradenton, Florida, and this is when everything was still a side slinger. Nobody had a gear drive.
Right.
And a 9.5 deck small block Ford is going to run a belt that's like 1,740 millimeters long. Yeah, that's, you could put it around the outside of your car. It's huge. And I start the season at Bradenton with 5 blower belts, thinking 5 blower belts are going to last me the whole year. And normally NMCA doesn't give you any. You get your 3 qualifiers. There's no testing the day before, but for some reason they allowed us to have 1 test the day before. I break a blower belt. Don't make it to the finish line, break a blower belt. Then we break a blower belt in each of the 3 qualifiers. So now we broke 4 blower belts. We go into eliminations on race day with 1 blower belt, and I've got a nitrous guy I drew for round 1, and he burnt pistons the night before. So we got to buy. And I tell the guys, I said, look, now bear in mind the record for Extreme Street back then, I think was in the 820s.
Okay.
And when we click off, we go into round 1. We got no one to race. We got a competition buy. I tell my guys, hey, I'm going to make an easy pass. I'm going to run this thing through the gears. I ran a 3-speed 400, only one in the world 25 years ago running a 3-speed. But I shifted the thing at like 6,500. I mean, didn't run it up at all because I don't want to break my last blower belt. And we went at 8:11 and smashed the record. I thought it was a turtle slow pass, and I'm at the end packing my, pulling my parachute, and I hear Nick Scavo say my name. Heard him say Marty Chance. I'm like, what's he talking about? And then one of my guys comes flying down on a 4-wheeler, Curtis Price. He's flying on this thing, and I'm seeing the back end of this thing, bounce up and down. I'm thinking there's emergency, like the car's on fire or something. I don't know. He comes in and says, you broke the record. You broke the record. I'm like, what? Yes, I thought it was slow enough I could get out and push. But
love it.
We had 15 minutes of fame there. We got the record, but Mike Dez tuning. Oh gosh, he's probably watching now. I'm horrible with names. Don't be offended. I forgot your name because I call my wife Honey even after 33 years of marriage because I've screwed that one up too.
That's a safety name.
Anyways, Dez and Chuck Bartholomew. They took my record away and was the first car to go in the 7s. I thought after we went that 8:11, I thought, oh, we're definitely going in the 7s. We're going to be the first in Extreme Street to go in the 7s. But nope, it was Chucky and Dez. Stole my thunder because I had no blower belt left.
Oh man.
Yeah, the best thing they did was when they went to that gear drive setup, the side swingers, just way out there, touching the inner fender, if you will. But I remember a time me and you. It was a NMRA race in Kansas City, and I was lucky enough to go with you that weekend, and had a little issue with the oil pan. And before we got there, I know you and Eric Gray changed that out. Ended up making all the way to the semis and against Johnny Uris. Back then, first race I remember in E1, you raced Don Burndown, and you guys sat there on the starting line. I don't know if you remember that, but
I remember that vividly. Yeah.
That was a good time.
What was cool was Manny Virginia came and warned me. He goes, hey, the guy you're gonna race, he's gonna try to burn you down. I said, burn me down. I said, I got the biggest intercooler in the world. I could sit here all day. I could make a sandwich. I mean, I said, great. I hope he does. Now you got to have a little bit of background to that race. Okay. This was Super Street Outlaw.
Right.
And I was racing with just a little F1R. Okay. Right. So I wasn't near as fast as the Super Street Outlaw guys. They were running the F3 series blowers, which was like, 700 horsepower more than me. And I had this little F1R. The reason I ran it was because Job Spetter had called me, says, hey, if you come up to Kansas City, I'll tune your car for free. Plus, once I got there, they said, hey, car count's really low. Would you just enter your car so that, we can get some points? Those of us who, towed all the way from New Jersey and New York, we don't want this to be a race that we don't get very many points because there's not very many rounds. So would you enter your car? So I entered thinking I was going to be a first-round duck, and we made it to the semis.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a great time. It was a great time. Yeah, I remember Manny being next to us too. He had the 8.2 deck with the 7709s with that Riker intake, that box style intake at that time. The red, white, and blue car, the notch.
Yeah.
That's a cool car.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good time back then. Gary, got anything?
I'm going to throw, I think we've seen this comment. I'm going to throw this back up here. But Cameron said, I remember going there when I was a kid talking about your shop. Roger Miller was one of his employees at that time, and he was my buddy's dad. As a kid, the Cheney Drive built so far away. That's from Cameron Marsoff, remembers that.
Oh, right on. Yeah. I seen Roger this summer. My grandkids' baseball game was at the same place as his grandkids' baseball game. But
okay.
Yeah, Roger is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You'd only have to meet him once, and you'd remember his laugh forever. It sounded like a Yamaha 80 on the rev limiter.
That's pretty funny right there. So in a couple of weeks, you're heading over to Indianapolis, Indiana?
Oh, yeah. PRI show. I
That's
think
a pretty big project to get prepared for, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge event. We've seen a lot of companies bow out and not go there. Economic reasons, I would assume, but I think that the PRI show is coming back really strong. Being in Indy, it's close enough for a lot of people from all over the country to drive to, but you'll also meet a lot of people that are international there.
Yeah,
we usually do at least 2 television interviews there, depending on what all new stuff we have coming out.
Yeah. You're going to talk about this right here?
Oh, we can.
Talk about the badass new pump. Oh.
Yeah. Well, the 2-for-1 would be Steve Morris just did some videos, and I think both of them got over 100,000 views within 48 hours.
Wow.
We've been wanting to do a titanium billet converter for about a decade and a half. About 15 years ago, we were looking into it. The cost of titanium is ever changing. And at the time we looked at it first, you was looking at a converter that was going to be somewhere in the $50,000 range for one torque converter. And at that time I was like, I didn't have that in my race car,
Right.
So it just wasn't feasible. And so we didn't even make a prototype. But we never got it out of our mind, and we've been wanting to do it. We brought back the Billet Titanium drive cover 2 years ago, which I think that was kind of a tip off to some people. And then we came out with the all titanium converter. Those of you who follow Steve Morris, he's got this really heavy car. I think it's like somewhere under 4,000 pounds, 3,800 pounds, something like that, with a twin turbo SMX motor that makes well over 5,000 horsepower. And on top of that, he pushes a 350 axle ratio. So that's kind of like trying to race your house. And the poor torque converter gets brutalized in that. So we thought, the ultimate test for this titanium converter would be put it in Steve Morris's car. If the power that Steve Morris makes pushing the weight of his vehicle with that much axle ratio doesn't destroy the converter, nothing can hurt it. So first we tested it on a dyno, and I didn't understand what he was telling me at first. He told me the thing dynoed like 4,200. In fact, he even said I stopped the dyno at 4,200 because my dyno wasn't really holding the power after that. And so the next conversation I had with him a few days later, I told him, I said, now that you've tested it on the dyno, we need you to test it at the racetrack. And I said, would you be willing to do that? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, so since you ran it on your dyno, do you want me to do anything different with it? Do you want me to make the stall higher or lower or change it? And he goes, no. He goes, I told you this thing made 4,200. I was like, so you didn't change the power? You didn't put more power to it? He goes, no, just change the converter. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that some power to the wheel was just the converter. I thought he was just jamming more boost to it or something. So he said, no,
sure.
I'm going to try this just like it is at the racetrack. Then, of course, it took him several months because it's a very busy schedule, and to find a track that can hold that kind of power and be prepped well enough, it took him quite a while. So it was a significant lapse in time. But when he finally did get it to the track, he had to turn the power way, way down because this thing, it's yanking the wheels out of the bin. He's carrying the wheels until he lifts, and the front wheel's not even turning. You look at his race pad, front struts are topped out at 0.3 of a second. I mean, it's just snatching them out of the beams. And so he ends up making 3 passes and keeps pulling more power, more power, more power. And with no power in the car, he goes out and goes faster than he ever had. Went the fastest 60. That thing went a 1060 foot. Almost two tons of fun going 1060 foot.
Whoa!
You look at the numbers and you go, as soon as he gets that thing out next year and gets to, he'll have Skinny Kid tune the chassis and make that thing handle the power and keep the front end down. And when he does, that big old tank might go in the 3s. And if he does, NHRA is going to have a nuclear come apart. That much weight going in the 3s, it's going to be ridiculous. Yeah. But anyways, we're real proud of Steve Morris. He did a great job testing that for us in the videos he makes. And when he did that, I even told him, I said, we planned on debuting this at PRI, but you did such a good job on your videos. We want you to go ahead and tell the public what it is. And that he revealed it was that titanium converter. It's still a very expensive part. It's not something that's going to be for everybody. Number one, the titanium converter was designed for turbo cars because you can't run the aluminum converter. So to get a lightweight alloy to take the temperature that turbo cars make, you got to have titanium. So the titanium is as light as the aluminum. A lot of people ask me, how much lighter is the titanium than the aluminum? It's not. In fact, aluminum's lighter. The material aluminum is lighter than titanium, but with titanium, you don't have to have as much thickness. So they wind up about the same weight. So now the turbo cars can have a converter as light as the blower and nitrous guys do with the aluminum converter. And we made it in the new power pump version. The new power pump version was something we actually developed last winter. Tested it for the first time in Kenny Hubbard's X275 car last December. And he went back to back, even at 2 different tracks. He put his old converter back in, then the power pump version converter, and did it at 2 different tracks back to back, going back and forth from new style to old style converter. Significantly faster, no doubt about it. Different DAs, different tracks. It was just hands down faster. And so, when we built the titanium for Steve Morris, we did it not only in titanium, but also in the power pump version. So the $1 million question is, how much does the converter cost? It's $25,000 for the all titanium converter. I know that's a really hefty price, but think about 15 years ago, it started out that thought that thing was going to be $50,000. Really expensive, but for the Pro Mod team that's already spent tremendous money and they need that little extra. You know what it's worth to race at the highest possible level and to pick up a few numbers. It's worth its weight in gold or titanium.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've been waiting on my front porch for mine, so it must be lost or something. I'll have to talk to Doug to see when he's going to bring it by.
You better check your UPS, man.
I thought you had a couple on order already, Rob.
I do. I have one order. I told Marty the other day I write him a check for one. I mean, I told him, he's like, I'll write you a check.
You've got a couple on order. Marty's just waiting for you to pay for it.
Hot Rod gets torque converters like Baskin Robbins, 31 flavors. Mid-season, late season.
Pick your state or flavor.
That's awesome.
Right on.
What's the most
Oh, go ahead.
You've got torque converters
ahead,
and pro mods and street cars and all kinds of stuff. What's the most unique vehicle that we wouldn't think that Marty would have a torque converter in that's different and unique? Is anything?
I had a guy call me from Russia, and he spoke English kinda, and really broken English, and he kept telling me,
What's
that
his
he
name?
had-
Putin?
yeah, something like that.
Good
Um,
night.
I couldn't understand exactly what he was saying, but I'm catching parts of it. He said he had a saline, and I'm thinking, okay, he's got a Mustang, and he kept saying, I got 572 cubic inches, and I got twin turbo, and then I could have swore he said 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. I'm like, hold on, you've got this thing's all-wheel drive, and he's trying to explain we don't have the sticky stuff you have. VHT traction compound. This is our track, So anyways, I finally told him, I said, look, why don't you take a video and send me a video? Send me a picture of the car. And that's when I realized it's a Lamborghini saline. Anyways, and it's got a big block Chevy with a 572 in it and twin 88 millimeter turbos. But the transmission was a Fortin. You guys are familiar with stadium racing trucks?
Yep.
And desert racing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Shift. Well, the clutch from Fortin. He says,
Yeah.
I have a machine shop. You tell me how I'll build the drive for the converter. I'm like, you're going to build? I said, do you understand the hydraulics? He says, no, you tell me. So I started giving him the basics on, hydraulic flow of a converter. And he literally built it. He built the pump, but this Fortin had it needed a starter ring gear in the middle of the torque converter. So we built a one-off. Oh, and it was real small. For a 572 twin turbo, I'm going to build a 10.5-inch Pro Mod big bore. He gives me the bell housing dimensions, and nothing more than an 8-inch converter is going to fit. I said, buddy, no way an 8-inch is going to hold a twin turbo 572. You're going to blow smack through it. So we're going to have to make it lock up. I said, this will get you off the starting line, and the slippage will help you from blowing the tires off. But you're going to have to lock it up in low gear, and you're going to have to lock it up in every gear. It's going to be a lockup. So we built him an 8-inch billet aluminum one-off lockup converter for this. I keep wanting to say, I remember it's a saline. Is that Lamborghini, or is that who makes a saline?
Steve Saline made the saline.
Guys.
I don't know, some European supercar that he put a big block it was a mid-engine car, like the Lamborghinis, and maybe it was Lamborghini, I don't remember. Anyways, yeah. So that would be the most unique. And in fact, I used to take it to PRI and let people guess at what it was. Bolt together with his ring gear in the middle of it.
Yeah.
That was
right.
That was a pretty unique deal. In the early days,
who would you say like your wildest customer is?
Well, back in
Marty?
the 1980s, I had a guy come to me wanting me to make a torque converter for a Honda motorcycle. In the 1970s, Honda made a motorcycle called the Honda Matic 750. It had an aluminum bolt-together converter. And so we cut the fins out of it, welded the fins back in, built a stator for it, and it was kind of a fun deal to do. It was different.
Right on. Cool. We got a question for you from Jeremy here. Here's a question right here.
Do I remember driving Helmer's Drax? Oh man, with the blown alcohol. Okay, yeah, I did. About flipped it over. Here's the picture. Okay, growing up when I was a teenager, I sold race cars for this guy out of Kansas City, and that's how I made money to build my race car. And I had sold the Helmers one of these dragsters. Now, these dragsters were not heads up. In fact, there wasn't even heads up back in the 1980s. Okay. These were mild steel shorty dragsters that use a shorty power glide. And the Helmers, Russ Helmers had me getting one, and they had a big block Chevy in it. Then they put a 1471 on it out of some guy's boat, some drag boat deal. And Ronnie and what was Ronnie's older brother's name? Those were the two that drove it. Well, Russ got mad at the boys for something, and he called me up and said, "Hey, you want to drive my dragster today?" And those of you who know, my towering height is over at 5'4", and the Helmers boys are like 6'2", 6'3", and I get to I get the opportunity to drive a blown alcohol dragster for the first time in my life. I drove a nitrous dragster, but
Right.
I'm putting it down. I'm like 19 years old, something like that, 20 years old. When he offers me to drive his blown alcohol dragster, I'm like, heck yeah, I am. I get in it and I can't reach the pedal. And but I'm not giving up my chance. I found a 2x4 at the racetrack, and we're sawing that sucker up, making little short pieces, and I duct taped them to the pedals so I could reach the pedals.
SFI legal 2x4.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly. Those are 30 mile an hour. But so I got my education on blown alcohol. The first time I tried to run this thing, I whacked the throttle, and instantly I think, I can see the sky. I can only see the sky. Oh God, I hope this thing doesn't go over. And I'm off the throttle, waiting to see if it's going to flip over backwards or if it's going to come back down, and it starts to come back down. And I had this brilliant idea. Just before the thing hits the front tires hit the ground, whack the throttle, and it went straight back up again. Oh my God, bad idea.
Where was that at? Was it like Kansas City track?
No, that's a Wichita. That was back when it was called Wichita International.
Okay.
Yeah, about kicked that joker over. And Russ was foolish enough to let me get in it one more time. And I thought, oh, this guy's never going to let me drive his car again. There's no way. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to roll out there, and I'm just going to give it half throttle. I'm going to come off the training brake and just roll into the throttle. Lesson number one for anybody who wants to race blown alcohol, especially with a wedge-headed Chevy motor, they make tremendous torque super fast. There's no difference from half throttle and full throttle. Front end came straight back up again. This time I got out of that throttle real fast. I'm like, no, he's not letting me drive it after this pass. So the front end comes back down, and I get back in the throttle. This rear engine dragster, 250-inch long, whatever it was, it goes sideways, and I straighten it back out, and I whack the throttle, and it goes the other direction. I went about a half mile in the quarter because I'm thinking, I know when I get back, he ain't never let me drive this thing again. So yeah, that was a pretty wild pass. I would imagine the black marks on Wichita International look pretty gnarly.
Yeah,
that was a 1980s term for those of you who heard gnarly.
Gnarly, dude.
Ronnie's brother was Gary. That was his brother's name.
Yeah,
Ronnie
Gary.
Homer. Gary Homer. Yeah. No, good stuff. So what are your plans or goals for 2024? I know you just announced the power pump. So anything else you got for 2024?
Yeah, we've always got a ton of stuff in research and development. We're working on several things. I'm sitting here trying to think which things should I mention, which things should I not, because if I mention something you're really interested in, I'm going to get 1,000 calls. Hey, when's it going to be ready? When's it going to be ready?
And you'll get 31 calls. There's only 31 people watching. You'll get 31.
There'll be 1,000 tomorrow.
Good news travels fast.
Right.
Kurt
says top secret.
In 2024, I want to get back on developing, finishing up the limited slip. The limited slip converter, when we release it, will change drag racing forever. It'll be the biggest thing since we released the bolt together converter 40 years ago. What the limited slip is, and I'm 5 years into developing it. I don't even know how much money we got, probably somewhere north of $250,000 already soaked in it. That's the problem with inventing something nobody's ever done before. You got to work your guts out, make a big pile of money, spend it on research and development. That gets you to the next level on it. Then you got to work your guts out for another 7-8 months, make a pile of money that you can put back into research and development. And that's why this thing has drug out. This came from, let me think, way back when we first built the Billet Aluminum Lockup Converter that changed drag racing. When we came out with the lockup, NHRA seeing that we dominated all forms of pro mod racing, nitrous turbo blowers. And NHRA basically decided they wanted a piece of the pie. And they said, Neal Chance, you want to play? You got to pay. So they banned my lockup. They banned it in top alcohol dragster and top alcohol funny car. And I had a long conversation. Well, actually, I called my buddy Billy Stockland. He's one of the biggest tuners for hire out there. Guy's brilliant. And I'm crying on his shoulder, boo-hooing. NHRA's picking on me. They banned my lockup converter. And he said, look, just call so-and-so. I'm going to give you his phone number. He's a real fair guy. He's on the rules committee. And I thought, okay, great. I'm going to call this guy and, I'll just explain my side of it. And it was like talking to a high-level politician who's trying to get reelected. Words came out of his mouth for about 40 minutes, but he didn't say anything. He talked in circles. Like, I asked him, I said, so, do I understand my converter's banned, my lockup converter's banned from top alcohol funny and top alcohol dragster? He says, well, yeah. I said, well, but why? He goes, well, because we got a rule. I said, I know you got a rule, but why is there a rule? Well, we got a rule. I know you got a rules committee. You're on the rules committee. He just kept talking in circles. And finally I tried to pin him down. I thought, okay, I've got him pinned down now. I said, listen, the clutch is legal. Clutch is legal here. Converter's legal here. The clutch, you get to lock it up. The converter, you don't get to lock it up. Where's the parity? How is that fair? He corrects me. Oh, no, Mr. Chance. We don't allow lockup clutches. I said, come on, pal. That's a play on words. They both lock up. So this is where he gave me the definition of regular versus lockup. He goes, a regular clutch locks on its own natural centrifugal force. A lockup clutch locks up by an external force that tells it how and when to lock up. I thought, okay, I'm picking up what you're throwing down. My lockup converter has a solenoid in the trans that tells the converter how and when to lock up. So I thought to myself, I build a torque converter that locks on its own natural centrifugal force. I'm regular. NHRA just gave me the definition of regular versus lockup. And so we went to work. Right. I hung up the phone. I went downstairs. At that time, Daniel was our lead engineer. I go downstairs to engineering. I'm telling him I got this idea, man. We got to do this. I'm all hyped up. And we start drawing it up in CAD CAM and designing this thing and looking at all the different ways we could do it. And but this was the early stages of the lockup. And the lockup first was for the nitrous guys. And a bunch of the clutch guys started coming over, and they were going faster than they were with the clutch. So now we're getting inundated with all these clutch guys, but back then they didn't have EFI. They had dual carburetors, dominators. Well, okay, dominators for a clutch specific car are not dominators, they're slobinators. They at an idle they'll kill the motor because they can't take load at an idle. Those carburetors were made for nothing, to see no load below 6,000 RPM. So now we've got the challenge of making these things work. And that's where we introduced the NXS into the nitrous converter. So carbureted cars could idle when you put them in gear with load on them in gear. And then within 18 months, guys like Todd Tutter are running it behind the blown alcohol Hemis, and they're flying. And now we got to develop a Hemi specific lockup converter. And before I know it, several years have gone by and I haven't built my limited slip converter. You notice we call it a limited slip because names have consequences. Words have rules and have weight penalties and stuff like that. So we call it a limited slip, not a lockup. We did test it in Carl Stevens' car. Carl Stevens has an NHRA Pro Mod twin turbo Hemi, and that car is fast. I do believe he set the mile per hour record, maybe even more than once. So we built him a duplicate of his converter with the limited slip built in. And on his dyno, it put 330 horsepower more to the tire than the exact same converter without it. I mean, first I was doing a happy dance like a little girl or something. And then the reality hit me. I'm like, oh no, NHRA, they throw a fit every time the turbo cars go more than 260 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, Carl, I can't let you run this thing in NHRA because you're going to go like 265, 260. NHRA would have a nuclear meltdown, and they wouldn't only ban it, they demonize it. And my whole reason for building it wasn't Pro Mod, because if you're racing NHRA Pro Mod, you got the budget to do anything you want anyways. We built the limited slip converter for the guy who doesn't have that $1 million budget. It's so the grassroots lower level heads up racer could race with the guy who has the $30,000 lockup. So this limited slip fits in any non-lockup transmission. Whatever regular trans you got, whether it's a Power Glide, whether it's a Turbo 400, a Bruno, whatever regular non-lockup transmission you have, this limited slip fits in it. Nothing else to buy. Just take your converter out, put this in, bada bing. Now you can run with the big dogs without the budget of the big dogs. So this will be not only one of the most significant inventions for heads up racing, but it's going to allow the little guy to race at the level of the guy who's got the big budget.
So you're saying I have a chance? I can race up against Gary.
Well, I seen the front of your guys' cars, and I noticed, his had 2 holes in the front of it, and yours had 1. I'm thinking,
see, I'll have 1. Yeah,
I thought, but that must be because Hot Rod's such a bad dude that it's like fighting with one arm tied behind your back. He's fighting with just one turbo. So
I'll be fighting with one turbo also. I sold the 2, and I've just got a one. I just got a big single now.
There you go. Bullies with your arms tied behind your back.
Trying to lighten my dang car up a little bit, so my car will be as fast as Rod's.
Huh? Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. My first race car was a rear engine dragster, and this was 1986, and we didn't have money. And we skipped the things that weren't necessary. Like we could eat ramen noodles twice a day, and that's all you needed to eat. On Sundays we had SpaghettiOs. We were splurging.
Right.
So every penny we had went into the race car. My first rear engine dragster had a Chrysler 8 3/4. Didn't even have a 9-inch Ford in it, and it had stock axles resplined. And so we put the nitrous on it for the first time. It was a fogger with a 28 jet. The fastest we had been before that was it went like 850s, and I think right off the bat we went 780s. Picked up 7/10 with a 28 jet on a fogger. Now, if you put yourself back in the late 1980s, nobody ran 7s. There was a few blown cars that did no nitrous stuff. There's very few nitrous cars anyways. So for a car to go out and go 780s was crazy. We pulled. My dad kept saying, "You better check them axles. You better check them axles." We pulled the axles out. They looked like pretzels, man. they had the full twist going on, candy canes.
That's funny.
So.
Hey, you were talking about that limited slip converter. Is that a current piece you're in production with now, or are you still are you producing it and selling it right now?
No, we do. No, we haven't. We haven't finished.
When you was building my converter,
all the research and development on it. In fact, I haven't touched it since about 12 or 13 months ago. I told you I sold my X275 Mustang. Well, that was the last thing I was testing on. We got a hub dyno. We got a Dynacom 7500, which I think is the baddest hub dyno on the planet. And we was using it to develop the limited slip converter behind my car. But I sold the car, and then I didn't have anything to test it with. So we decided to take one of my motors from my top fuel car and switch it over to alcohol and use that as the dyno mule. So I took one of my old funny car chassis and put that in it. And I thought this would be a great deal to test with. And of course, the reality slap was one of the guys in the shop said, "Hey, what about a day when we need to make 40 pulls on that torque converter? What's the maintenance going to be on that Hemi?" And the reality went, yeah, that wasn't very smart. So Steve Morse is going to build us a pump gas motor that we can just rag on. So as soon as we get the the new pump gas motor from Steve Morris in the dyno mule, we're going to get back on testing the limited slip converter. My goal would be sometime fall. If we could be ready for production in fall of next year, that would be hopefully a realistic idea. But look, for 40 years, we've been developing things nobody ever dreamed of doing. In the racing converter industry, the vast majority of new technology over the last 40 years has come from Neal Chance Racing Converters. And I say that humbly. I'm grateful that I've got the absolute best team in the world. I get to take credit for it, but I'm the one who gets the credit, but my team is what makes Neal Chance Racing Converters great. The research and development there, to the guys that fab up the prototypes and stuff like that. We just got a phenomenal team. But anyways, we hope to have that tested and ready to go in the fall of next season.
Cool.
Oh, that's great.
We are coming out with
just real quick, just to tell everybody, just real quick, what everybody's watching. If you want to go ahead and start just making any comments, any comment, Gary will pull up, and so for Marty can answer. But while we're doing that, just I've seen a couple of questions have come in. But while you're doing that, Marty, I just want to ask you a question, and I'm going to switch it up here for a second. We've been talking about racing for a little bit. So for me, just your dad. Like, I would see your dad in town. I would see your dad at the racetrack. I would see your dad at your shop, you know, just in passing and that sort of thing. And, you know, for me, just always seemed like the nicest guy, real friendly, you know, always had a smile on his face. Like, for you, I just want you to tell me, like, your best memory you can think of with your dad.
Well, growing up in my dad's house, I was scared to death of him. He made it clear on multiple occasions that he brought me into this world. He'd take me right back out.
Especially when you brought home a Ford.
I moved out of my dad's house 2 weeks after high school, and it was like a light switched. All of a sudden, he was a totally different person, and we was best friends ever since then. And we did everything together. We built hot rods together. We built race cars. We went racing. We went all over the country. I'm one of the very few that could say my dad was my best friend, and what a great friend he was. He was also a role model. You know, growing up as a kid, you know, my dad taught me in business. He taught me business ethics, like your most important customer is not the guy who's spending the most money with you. It's the guy you're talking to right now. Whether he's never going to spend any money with you at all and he just has a question, he's the most important guy. Treat everybody as if they are the most important. And so that's one thing we try to do. I've hired multiple corporate consultants, and they all tell me the same thing. You're spending way too much time with every customer you talk to. You got to stop doing that. And so I just fire them and do it my way. Because I think it's worthwhile to invest in relationships, not quick sales. We built our company off of relationships. You know, 15 years ago, nobody knew about, you know, linking in and looking at someone's race pack through a video, through TeamViewer or AnyDesk or something like that. And we spend the time, whether you're a local bracket racer that you're not going to be on TV, or whether you're Stevie Fast, and the recipe is the same. You give the guy the time he needs to help move his program forward. And I think people see the difference.
There's a question from our friend Craven.
Good.
How did the Christmas lights? Well, it was not a God-given talent, that's for sure. Just to let everybody know what happened or what's going on. Me and my wife have a Christmas light display drive-through. This will be our 4th year. This came about because in 2019 I had a stroke, and all my doctors said I could never drive a race car again. So that completely changed my life. Since I was a kid growing up, I couldn't wait till I was old enough for my dad to let me go to the drag strip with him. I think I had to be 10 or 11 years old. and begged to go before that. But when I was finally old enough to go, drag racing was everything to me. I loved it. That's all I wanted to do. And, it's been a blessing that I got to do drag racing until I was 51 years old. What a great blessing. You know, we take it for granted a lot of times, those of us who get to drive race cars, that if you think about the nearly 8 billion people in this world, 99.9% of them could only dream of doing what we do every weekend, driving these race cars. So we literally got to live the dream. So 2019, I had a stroke. The doctor says, you can't ever drive race cars again. And by the way, you got to take 6 weeks off. I'm like, Doc, I never took 6 days off in my life. I'm not taking 6 weeks off. And he just looked at me and said, son, you don't know what you're talking about. You cannot even walk into your office. You can't even be on the property of your business for 6 weeks. I'm like, dang, man, this guy's serious. All right. So day one out of the hospital, I watched a little TV and I was done. I don't know how anybody can sit at home and sit in front of a television. I can't do it. Day number 2, I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, it was almost August, and I got a circle drive in my front driveway. I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to build some these hoops to drive through, and I'll put Christmas lights on them, and I'll have this drive-through light thing I could drive my car through for Christmas, and that looked kind of cool. And I got that built, and then I thought I'm going to buy a little nativity scene. It was just a very simple outline of a nativity, and it was going to be like $7,500. And I'm like, I'm not spending $7,500 on that. I went and got some wrought iron. I had the guys from the shop bring me a MIG welder. I have no artistic ability at all, so I can't draw a stick man. So one of my buddies came over and drew with my grandkids sidewalk chalk on my garage floor the outline for the nativity scene. And I didn't even have any tools at my garage at home, so I bent the wrought iron by hand, sticking the wrought iron through a hole on my lawnmower chassis, and I just lay it down on top of that template on the concrete until I couldn't bend it any tighter, and then I'd cut it and I'd start over, and when I was done, I just welded all the pieces together, put rope light on it. And the first time I plugged it in, I was the one who was in amazement. I was like, holy cow, that looks better than that crap for sale commercially. And I still had 6 weeks to go. So by the time I was done, I had a nativity scene that was like 70 or 80 feet long. And I kept building them for a year. People kept showing me pictures of stuff. And there was a challenge to try to build it. I think the challenge was that I have no artistic ability. So, that was the real challenge, and I had fun doing it. And so it's kind of replaced being behind the driver's seat of a race car. I still love racing. I still, I get to live out my racing life through guys like you guys who let me build a converter for your hot rod and help you tune the thing in by remoting into your data log and dialing the thing in. But so that's how the Christmas light deal started. And we've made it bigger this year. We had a company come in that makes roads, and we built my wife's a real good sport. She let me build a road all the way around the perimeter of our house, right through the middle of the lawn. I thought when that happened, she might kill me, but she's a great sport, and I wouldn't be able to make all this stuff without her. She's very artistic. I'm the one that doesn't know what colors go together. We were hanging lights late last night, and they had to come out and go, orange does not go with that. I'm like, okay, just show me what color.
As big as your display has gotten, when do you have to start setting it up?
Oh, man. Well, the first 3 years, it took me and my wife 400 hours to set it up. So we'd start in September. But if anybody knows what rotator cuff surgery is, which I had no idea how debilitating it is, she had rotator cuff surgery about 3 months ago. And so she hasn't been able to help the way she normally would. So it's taken a lot longer. Plus, making it bigger, we had no idea what it was going to take. All my family is out there putting stuff up right now while we're doing this. we're doing this interview.
Thank you, Chance family.
Yeah, thank you very much. So when can we start? When does your display start? Thursday,
opens
Friday?
Thanksgiving night. Runs every night from Thanksgiving to Christmas every night. It's always free. I think we're the only one in Kansas that's free. We don't want any money. We want everybody to just come out and enjoy the Christmas deal. We put up a barn this year. And inside the barn, we take non-perishable food donations that'll go to the Union Rescue Mission, the Cheney Emergency Pantry, and also the Cheney Baptist Church Pantry. So the Christmas lights are free. If you want to make a donation to help someone this Christmas season who maybe a little down on their luck, needs a little bit of help, we'll make sure that they get that.
That's awesome.
Nice. That's great, Marty. Good
We
stuff.
we also added a bunch of photo ops at the barn and inside
Okay.
we have a life-size Santa sleigh with the reindeer. People can get in. We had that last year. But this year we bought a sleigh that's pulled by 6.5 foot tall horses, and they're made out of white lights, so they look translucent. And 2 or 3 people can sit in the sleigh. We put up a 26-foot translucent tree. We just have a bunch of different scenes that you can take pictures with inside and outside of the barn.
Nice. I remember last year coming and me and my family got in the sleigh and took the picture. I remember that. That was a good time.
Yeah,
that was a good time. Anybody else have any questions? I see some people. The Craven question was great, but just
There was a
anybody
question
else?
for me back up here a little ways
Okay.
from right here from freaking Rican Jose. Does Gary want to sell that red fox? Not yet. When I sell it, it won't be red.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. And my wife had an idea: sell the car and get a boat.
Go fishing.
I tried that, guys. 2 happiest days of a boat owner's life is the day you buy it and the day you sell it.
Listen.
Yeah. Yeah. Bust out another 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's good. So Marty,
go ahead, Rod.
Go ahead, Gary. Well, I was just going to say, so Marty, I was going to give you some time to open it up. Anything, usually when we're talking to people at this point, we're just talking about like anybody you want to give a shout out to, anybody you want to thank, as far as your, who you work with or your businesses or who supports you and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, we just got off the subject of the Christmas lights, so I want to thank my wife's family, who's spent a lot of time helping us. Curtis Price, he lives in the Oklahoma City area, and he's traveled down 4 or 5, 6 times, and spent 3, 4, 5 days helping us get this up. Without all those guys helping, there's no way this would have been able to happen. At my shop, definitely wanted to thank the great team that we have. Whether it's getting guys converter repairs or mods done and knocked out super fast, or the research and development guys. We just got a phenomenal team that makes it happen, and I'm just the guy that that gets the credit for it. I'm not the guy that actually makes it all happen. Those guys are a great team. So I do want to mention a few things that's coming out. We'll have this at PRI, of course, the power pump stuff, which is available in billet aluminum for the nitrous and blower guys, in billet steel for the turbo guys, and of course the billet titanium. We are coming out street guys. Hey, we haven't forgot about you. The last couple of years, we've been pouring a tremendous amount of time and money into developing the latest, greatest street stuff. Since 1,000, 1,500 horsepower, 2,000 horsepower street drivable cars with lockup transmissions like the 4L80. We see 4L80s not just behind LSs and Chevrolets, but behind Fords and Gen 1 Hemis, and they're behind everything. The biggest problem with having, say, a 1,500 horsepower twin turbo street rod, you're going to take on drag week, and you want to be able to lock it up in every gear, is that on a lockup transmission and converter, the lockup doesn't have the same pressure your transmission does. Your transmission guy might have told you, yeah, you got 200 pounds of line pressure. That line pressure only goes to your clutches and bands inside the transmission. Your torque converter only has about 60 to 70 pounds of converter charge pressure. And what locks up that lockup clutch inside the 4L80 or 6L or any factory style lockup is that converter charge at 60 to 70 pounds. What they do is the input shaft goes on the backside of that lockup clutch, and it has a switcher valve in the trans that turns that into a vacuum. So it vacuums the pressure from the backside of the lockup clutch, but you still got that 60 or 75 pounds on the front side, and that's all that's applying it. 60 to 70 pounds of pressure is applying your lockup clutch. Could you imagine trying to hold high gear clutches in your transmission with 70 pounds of pressure? You smoke that clutch right away. So we've developed a prototype 4L80. It'll be at PRI, and it's bolt together, it's lock up, and we know it'll hold over 2,500 horsepower. Locked up in every gear.
Cool.
We tested it in a turbo diesel. You heard me right, turbo diesel.
Brutal.
Not only did it lock up in every gear and hold it, but he went the fastest he'd ever gone. And on his second pass, he smashed a tranny and said, I'm never... His tranny guy wouldn't build him another tranny. I think he went to a...
Oh, man, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, looking forward to that, seeing that at PRI. This is my first time going to PRI. I know Gary's been a few other times before, but we'll definitely be looking for you there when we go. I'm excited to go.
Look forward to it. Any of you are going to be at PRI, come by our booth. It's number 2729, or you can just look us up on the PRI app. Be sure to come by and see us. We'd love to say hi.
Yep.
No, it sounds good.
Good
Sounds good. Gary, do you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, I got my stuff. We've covered all the stuff that I had kind of jotted down. What you got?
Yeah, I'm feeling good as well, and I think we've answered everybody's questions and that came in to the box, and so I just turn it over to Marty for one last time. If you got any final thoughts or anything, just say it now, and we'll close it out.
No, just appreciate you guys giving me the time, and keep building those hot rods, and give us a call if you need anything converter wise, and we'd love to be able to design something for anybody's new team, old team, whatever you're doing. We're sure we can help you move your team forward.
Cool.
We appreciate you giving us the time here, Marty, and appreciate all you do for us in the converter world. So,
yeah, thanks for your time, and Kurt has if you don't have a chance, you don't have a chance. That's right.
Right on.
There you go. That's it. Yeah. Hey, I just thought of something. If you got another second, Marty.
Yep.
Tell me how Street Outlaws changed for you. Did the show Street Outlaws, how did that change your business at all?
Well, okay. I've been in this for 40 years, so I've seen a lot of things. Whether you love the show or you hate the show, there's one thing nobody can deny. And at least in the last 40 years, there has been nothing promote our sport better than the Street Outlaw shows. When they first came out, I can't tell you how many guys I met who said, they might have been in their 50s or 60s and even 70s going, yeah, I've got this old Camaro, this old Mustang, this old hot rod that's been in my garage. I hadn't even fired up in 6 years, and now I'm all gassed up. I'm getting that thing back out. I'm going to start running it again. It brought our sport to the masses. I mean, all of us gearheads, we already know about racing, but the television show brought our sport to the masses who otherwise wouldn't be exposed to it. And I think they did it in the correct way. They gave the guy who doesn't know all about race cars something to identify with each one with one race or another, the same way NASCAR did it. And that's why NASCAR had grown into one of the biggest motorsports in all of the world. because of the way it was promoted. And the drag racing sport needs to be promoted the same way NASCAR was. I mean, Rod, when you and me were kids, NASCAR was just a bunch of hillbillies driving around in circles on the dirt. And now look at them.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of money behind every NASCAR, the guy who takes dead last in NASCAR race, you've never even heard his name, wins more money than the best drag racer in a full season.
That's right.
Right.
Guys,
Right.
we need to take a look at how our sport's promoted. And if some of these shows come out and you don't like some of the drama on it, got to understand that maybe you don't like the drama, you just want to watch the racing. But the guy who doesn't completely understand about race cars, who didn't grow up doing this, once he identifies with some driver that he didn't grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth, he didn't grow up rich, he worked 2 jobs and so he could afford to build this race car and keep it going. And that's when the general public realizes, wow, I could do this too. And that's what grows our sport. So that would be the thing I'd want to leave everybody with. The Street Outlaws show has done more to promote our drag racing than anything in my 40 years of racing.
Well said.
Well said. Well said. Well said. You know, it's funny too. I've heard that before, where you see someone on the show and you're like, oh man, look at that guy, and but you meet him in person, it's like the nicest person, or just talking to you, you're like, yeah, I don't want to drop any names, but it's like, he was just in here and he was just so nice, and we just met up and I'm like, man, in the show, he seems like he's not so nice, but yeah, it's just funny. Yeah.
You got to realize you've got promoters who take a look at the guys on the show, and they know who to push buttons on to get them to react or blow up or make drama, because drama makes good TV to the masses.
Yep.
So that's just part of it. But if you notice, most of these guys on the TV show, when they come to your local drag strip, you'll notice that when a lot of races already put their stuff up, they're still shaking hands and talking to kids and doing a great job of being friends to these young people, answering their questions, and spending that time with these young kids is what fuels them into having dreams of being race car drivers themselves, to continue to grow.
That's right.
So hats off.
Well,
to
and just
all the shows.
And just to piggyback on that, like me riding my bicycle 1 block over and seeing your dad's Corvette is what, like, man, when you would come over with your 73 Camaro and I would look at that thing, it's like, I want to be that guy. It's the same thing. It really is. So, but I appreciate that final thought. And that's, that's all I have.
I dream of being a race car driver too. And I act like a little kid.
Yeah, I hear you, man. That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Mr. Marty. And we appreciate your family for letting you come out here. I know they're in the barn working. And so, we definitely appreciate this hour and a half. And it looks like Kurt and Shelly are going to PRI as well. So we'll meet up there. Oh, we got another question.
Well, my thought on all these drag shows. Well, we lost 9 racetracks last year, and I think 5 this year. It's a rough deal. You're seeing places that are pushed out by taxes. There's more than one way to get rid of a drag strip. If there's a city council, or if there's so I don't want to step on toes, or well, I don't care. If the local politics want to get rid of your local track, there's ways to do that. But there's also, even without politics trying to get rid of your track, the simple economics. When a housing development would come in and offer you far more than what it's worth, it's hard for that guy the racetrack owner to keep it open. The Chance family drag strip, Ozark Raceway Park, we were really fortunate. Craven, one of the guys that just posted on here, worked with us. We all worked together to keep it a racetrack, and we had the offers also. As a housing development, it would have made a lot more money. But Craven told us what we wanted to hear. He said, I don't care if this thing loses money. I'm going to keep it open, and I'm going to move it forward. We're like, okay, we need to work with this guy, because then we know that this is one racetrack that'll stay open. So, Chris, we really appreciate you. Thanks for your commitment to keep Ozark Raceway Park open. Guys, I want to encourage you to support your local racetrack, whether it's Ozark or wherever it's at, Mocan or whatever your local track is. Understand the commitment, for a guy that owned a racetrack since 2009. I can tell you the honest truth is it never once made me a paycheck. It never once paid me a penny. But there's plenty of times where we had to bail it out to the tune of big numbers. And so what I'm trying to emphasize is don't take your racetrack for granted. Support them. Even little things. I know you can buy bottled water for 18 cents a bottle, and your racetrack's going to charge you $2. Come on, man, let them make $2. Walmart won't let you race in their parking lot. Support your racetrack. Buy a hamburger from the guys. Bring some spectators to watch your racing. Also, we got to keep these things alive. And one thing I think that'll help racetracks stay alive, I would really encourage every mom and pop drag strip to have a live feed. And guys, you need to pay for the live feed, even if it's $5. I know everybody wants to go, I live feed, I'll be free. Well, you know what? When bottled water first came out, those of us who are old enough to remember when bottled water came out, we thought that was nuts. Nobody's gonna pay for water. But you don't mind paying $2 for a bottle of water as you're walking through the grocery store checkout. I mean,
Right.
For tracks to live, we're not going to bring the masses back to fill the stands. That's not going to happen. When I was a kid in the 70s, the 80s, when the guy came on the radio and went, Sunday, 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 the place was packed out. I mean, there was 5 or 6
Right.
people at the fences all the way to the finish line. Those days are gone. We're not patient people. Back then, there was only 3 channels of TV. I know a lot of you aren't going to understand this. There was only 3 channels on TV, and they shut off at 10 p.m. Okay?
Yeah.
You got 300 channels on your telephone. And, in fact, gas stations weren't even open on Sunday. Okay, we've slowly changed into these to a people that are instant gratification on everything, whether it's fast food, fast this, fast everything. You watch at your local racetrack, if there's an oil down, look up in the stands, and there's somebody on his cell phone going, oh, hey, there's a party at Joe's. We're out of here. They're not going to wait. They're not patient. So
Right.
we've got to take the races to the masses. And the way you do that, right here on your cell phone.
It's in your hand.
And we need live feeds for every event, from bracket race to heads up to whatever. And even if it's just $5, guys, you pay $5 for a bottle of water. Don't piss and moan about the thing you have to pay for it. You've got to keep your racetracks open, or we're not going to have racing. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And that gives me an idea.
Well said.
I've done a bunch of these live feeds when I don't race. I live feed just a small tire stuff. Everybody that's watched my live feed, I'm going to send you a bill for $5, and then I'm going to give that to the track. How's that sound?
Right on.
I'd pay it. I'd pay it for sure.
Look in your mailbox. There'll be a bill. There'll be an invoice for $5.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for talking through that. That was a great question there, Mark. Appreciate that.
Right on, guys. Yep.
Yeah,
Hope,
good.
have a happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas.
Yes, sir. You too.
Oh, you as well, Marty. You as well. We'll see you soon. I'll see you at the Christmas lights, and then we'll see you at PRI.
Right on.
See you in
Thanks,
a few
buddy.
weeks at PRI.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks, Marty.
Yep.
Everybody watching, we're out, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.